Hello, welcome everybody. We're going back to the 1930s, the Great Depression. One-fourth of Americans are out of work across the world, unemployment, low productivity, poverty due to this Great Depression. And the question you answered in your warm-up is, who's responsible for fixing all of this? So today's lesson, we're going to see how did governments and people respond to the Great Depression? And then you're going to assess which responses were the most effective. The big response that we're going to look at today is called populism. This is the main vocabulary word for the lesson. You'll need to know it in the Show What You Know, and it's what the Try It's going to be all about. Populism comes from the Latin word people, and populism is a style of doing politics that focuses on the people and has the support of the people. And I'll explain some characteristics in the next few slides. One of four characteristics I'm going to tell you about of populism involves a charismatic leader, someone who's magnetic, something that the people are drawn to, who just has these leadership abilities that are appealing to people, that sucks people in, that make people want more, that want to put that one person on a pedestal to lead. One example of that today is Donald Trump. He's really seen as a populist leader, somebody who he wasn't part of the Republican Party. Instead, he kind of came in from outside the establishment and got the support of a lot of people with his charismatic speaking and the things that he was promising. And now he is very right-wing, right? Even more right-wing than the Republican Party in terms of the hatred that he talks about and in terms of the limited government that he's demanding. But also populism could be on the left. So his enemy, Bernie Sanders, his political rival, is also a populist, seen as somebody who is massively appealing to a broad amount of people. And he's demanding totally different policies than Donald Trump, but he's still seen as a populist, charismatic leader because he has the support of a large amount of people rather than coming in through the political party in particular. I just wanted to give you those two examples so that you could see that populists could be on the left. They could be left-wing, communists or socialists or other left-wing people, Democrats even, or they could be on the right wing and be more conservative. It could go either way. There's a large history of populism in Latin America. So here's some examples. If you're from any of these countries, you may recognize some of these people: Getulio Vargas, Juan Perón, more recently, Daniel Ortega, Hugo Chavez, some of these different populist leaders of Latin America. And we'll delve into the history of populism in Latin America later. It's pretty interesting. Populism also, here's our number two. Populism involves us versus them rhetoric. We got to blame somebody for the problem. People like that. It's like appealing. One example of this is from the Occupy Wall Street movement from about 10 years ago. This idea of the 99%, which is most of us, versus the 1%, the rich. That's our enemy, the rich, the 1%. So they're targeting the rich as a scapegoat, as saying this is the person who's responsible for our problems. Now you'll see Donald Trump doing that in a different way sometimes, right? By blaming foreigners, maybe Mexicans or Central Americans or other immigrants for some of the problems of America. But it's a similar tactic of us versus them. Three, using the government to help people. Welfare programs. You may be familiar with some welfare programs of the United States, like SNAP, food programs, Medicaid. Section 8 is a kind of welfare program, and other countries have much bigger welfare programs that might include healthcare and other things like that. But it's using the government's resources to help and support people. And then the fourth aspect of populism is greater justice and equality for all. So this promise that the government, with the government's help, with this charismatic leader, we will defeat whoever that enemy is and bring greater justice and equality to the people. So you are going to look at three different articles, one of three different articles, where you are going to apply these ideas of populism to the examples that you're going to look at. Populism became a really popular response to the Great Depression. There were populists in the government, and then there were populist responses among ordinary people. And this is what you're going to do for your Try It section. You're going to say, how effective were populists in responding to the Great Depression? And you're going to choose one of these populist responses to focus on. So there's three different Word documents that you can choose. Just pick one. Pick whichever one is more interesting, and I'll talk about each of them right now. The first one is populist president. So if you're interested in seeing what did the government do in a populist way, to address the Great Depression. You're going to compare the speeches of a little section of the speeches of Lázaro Cárdenas, who was the president of Mexico, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was the president of the United States. Both made huge sweeping reforms to the economy and to the role of the government in a way to deal with the Great Depression. So you'll see how did government step in? Number 2 is the GM auto worker strike in Oshawa, Canada. These are people who worked in a car factory in Canada going on strike, which means altogether refusing to work in order to get their demands met during the Great Depression when they were suffering. So you'll get to see what were the actions that these Canadian car workers took to try to deal with some of the problems of the Great Depression. Populism, because they were all acting all together for the demands of the people. And then for number 3, if you're interested in looking more at imperialism, this is the Vietnamese independence movement. So this is when Vietnam started to use the opportunity of the Great Depression to try to kick the French out of Vietnam. So getting the support of the people, populism, to try to resist the French colonization of Vietnam. And if you later on, we're going to learn about the Vietnam War. This third section is a precursor to the Vietnam War, understanding some of the context of what was happening in Vietnam after World War I and during the Great Depression. So again, you're just going to pick one of these 3 to write about. And then in our second lesson for this week, you're going to pick a modern issue that's related to whichever of these 3 populist responses from the 1930s that you chose, and you'll do a comparison. And that's that.